Welcome to the InfoMullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the InfoMullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. Oh, will universities be better than today by the end of 2021? My forecast is no, they will not. And it goes back to that question number 8. Because we cannot contain the pandemic and these conditions persist, the things that are hurting universities in devastating ways now will continue to hurt universities in the future. A lot of these forecasts are contingent on that question number 8. If the US can get herd immunity, all this changes, but I don't see that happening in 2021. So now all these other ripple effects in this ecosystem that are connected to this have to sustain pandemic-like conditions through most of 2021, if not all. So first of all, even before 2020, Moody's had downgraded the financial viability of a bunch of colleges, right? They could absorb at most. Their financial situation was so precarious, which is odd when you think about the tuition they charge, but there's a huge infrastructure and bureaucracy overhead that they have to pay. They predicted, Fitch's, which is one of these rating agencies, said colleges could sustain maybe 5% reduction in annual enrollment. Like that was their buffer. Like, if it's 5%, we'll get through. There's been a 21% enrollment reduction. And that's the first wave of enrollment reductions where people are like, well, you know, maybe I'll be partially online, partially working at home in fall, but it will be better. As this persists through 2021, new cohorts aren't going to come in the freshman class. Existing cohorts are going to begin dropping out, and you may see that enrollment reduction sustain in 2022, and it's going to be harder or 2021. It's going to be harder and harder for universities to absorb that. This means they have to cut out more costs to preserve their credit ratings, which may accelerate the types of problems they have, right? When they get these credit ratings, because they need to get these access to debt to fund themselves, they've got to show solvency. And if they have a drop in revenue, then they're going to have to drop their expenses. And as they drop their expenses, they're losing services that could attract people, and it becomes this vicious cycle, this vicious feedback loop. Now, the other things, the pressures that are going on it, is that people are asking, what are we getting for this payment, right? We're paying all this money, and yet you're teaching us online. This is a self-inflicted wound. Universities had lots of time to experiment with MOOCs and other online things. And I hear all the pedagogists out there say, well, MOOCs aren't really effective and they aren't that good. Well, if you never test, you better get used to testing them and experimenting them, because now you have a situation where you have almost a forced online environment for 2 years. And it's not ideal, but what are you going to do? So by pushing off this kind of, well, it's, you know, is the perfect was the enemy of the good, I think a lot of universities got caught flat-footed, just like organizations that didn't teach their workforce how to work remotely got hammered and flat-footed when this thing hit. They had to go in a matter of weeks. They had no basis to begin from. A lot of universities are the same. They kind of pushed it off, said, we don't have to go online. Look at our facilities. This is a wonderful pool. But they're struggling now. They have to go online, and they aren't able to provide the kind of value that justifies the tuition costs that people are seeing. And tuition in the US is very expensive. The contingency to this forecast that means universities will do better in 2021 is a bailout from Congress. And this is actually more likely than some of the other scenarios I've talked about, where I'm like, well, you know, there's not enough in the Senate to get it through. University level bailouts has been a consistent, persistent function of the relief bill since the very beginning. And in this last relief bill, there was a lot of funding for COVID-related responses for schools and universities. There was a large multi-$100 billion piece of that's going in there. So there is some appetite for that kind of thing. And these universities, as much as people like to say, well, ideologically, the conservatives don't like universities, they're going to let them die on the vine. Remember, all politics is local, and universities are money makers for the states that they're in, especially these large ones. You may be, ivory tower academics, zombie, but you also know who's bringing in a lot of money and commerce for a lot of these towns where these large colleges are, and you're not going to want to see that just collapse for no reason. So there may be more impetus to do college funding than there is state funding. Of course, these are all connected. If states start to collapse and they cut services, part of what they're going to cut is the funding to public schools and public universities that's going to cause further. So these things are all interrelated. Best forecast I never made. So this is another tangent here, a little bit of humor. I get asked a lot of forecasts that I declined to make. And the best forecast I never made was in 2019. I was asked, who wins the Israel election? And I passed. I said, I got no clue. I'm not doing it. And you know what? I passed on the Israel election of April 2019. I passed on the Israel election of September 2019. I even passed on the Israel election of March 2020. Keep them coming, Israel. You can throw as many elections as you want. I'm going to pass on every single one. You know, I'm not getting involved. Have as many as you want. It's like having a land war in Asia, trying to predict who's going to win that frickin' Israeli election. I'm not getting into it. I'm not doing. You can have as many elections as you want. I'm not going to make a forecast. So that's the best forecast I never made, was avoiding getting involved in Israel politics. Questions here. Look, people. Yeah, people are. So question on the college sports are moneymaker, not always colleges. Yeah, this is a good point. So this is another thing that's hurting universities, is the moneymaker in colleges are the sports, and the sports aren't being attended. So there's lack of attendance. That's another revenue hit. Another question, pedagogist here, MOOCs don't work. Happy to talk that through later. Absolutely, we can talk it through, but what's your choice? I mean, it may not be a MOOC. I use MOOC as a proxy for online. If the pandemic continues through 2021, what's the alternative? You got to find something to do online, or you're putting your people at risk. Yeah, fair point, Jen. I used MOOCs as a proxy for online instructions because I'm an uneducated person. Online instruction is really what I'm talking about, not just MOOCs. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the InfoMullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a mulleteer and support the InfoMullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.